A mountain man opens a freight crate expecting timber, but instead, 2 6-year-old twins jump out and shout the last word he ever expected to hear. "Pa!" The winter wind stops, the horses freeze, and this quiet man, who's lived alone for years, stares at the boys who swear he's their father. But before he can send them back, riders thunder out of the pines, searching for the very same twins, men with cold eyes, men who don't ask questions. By sundown, the mountain man realizes this wasn't a mistake at all. Someone sent these boys to him, on purpose, and the twins carry a secret so dangerous, even speaking it makes them shake. Now snow is closing in, gunmen are closing fast, and those 2 boys believe he's the only soul in the world who can save them. What truth are the twins hiding? And why were they told to find him? A man who never had children. Before it's too late. Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Adam Crowley's mountain homestead as he waited for the supply wagon. He stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching the winding trail that led up to his cabin. The autumn air held a sharp bite, warning of the winter to come. His boots needed mending, and his coat had seen better days, but those repairs could wait until after the timber supplies arrived. The creak of wagon wheels and the heavy breathing of horses finally broke the mountain silence. Adam straightened, checking his pocket watch. The driver was several hours behind schedule. The wagon emerged around the last bend, moving slower than usual, the horse's flanks dark with sweat from the climb. "Afternoon, Mr. Crowley," the freight driver called out, pulling back on the reins. The wagon groaned to a stop in front of the cabin. "Sorry for the delay. Had to fix a broken wheel down in the valley." Adam nodded, not one for unnecessary words. "No matter. Got my supplies?" "Aye, that I do." The driver, a weather-beaten man named Jenkins, climbed down from his seat. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he walked to the back of the wagon. "Though there's something else." A loud thump from inside a large wooden crate interrupted him, followed by muffled giggling. Adam's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" Before Jenkins could answer, the side of the crate burst open. 2 small figures tumbled out onto the wagon bed in a tangle of arms and legs, identical down to their tousled brown hair and patched clothes. "Papa!" they shouted in unison, scrambling to their feet. Adam stepped back in shock as the 2 boys, they couldn't have been more than 6 years old, launched themselves off the wagon. They ran straight for him, grabbing onto his coat with small, determined hands. "Papa, we found you," one of them said, pressing his face into Adam's side. "We knew you'd be here," the other added, clinging just as tightly. Adam stood frozen, staring down at the 2 identical faces beaming up at him. His mind refused to make sense of what was happening. "There's been some mistake," he managed to say. Jenkins pulled a stack of papers from his coat. "No mistake, Mr. Crowley. Got the paperwork right here from St. Bridget's Orphan Asylum. Names you as their guardian, clear as day." "That's impossible." Adam carefully disentangled himself from the boys' grip, though they stayed close to his sides. I'm not their father." "Papers don't say you're their father," Jenkins said, holding out the documents. "Just says you're their appointed guardian." The wind picked up, carrying the first real chill of evening. The boys shivered in their thin clothes, pressing closer to Adam. He looked down at their hopeful faces, then back at Jenkins. "There's been some mistake," he repeated firmly. "I never agreed to be anyone's guardian." "Way I see it," Jenkins said, glancing at the darkening sky. "It's getting mighty cold, and these boys need somewhere warm for the night. You can sort it out proper in town tomorrow." Adam ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders despite his protests. The boys were watching him with wide, anxious eyes now, their earlier excitement giving way to uncertainty. The temperature was dropping fast as the sun disappeared behind the ridge. "Please, Papa," one of the twins whispered, his small hand finding Adam's again. Adam sighed deeply. "Come on then," he said, turning toward the cabin. "Best get you two inside before dark." The boys' faces lit up, and they hurried after him as he walked to the porch. Adam paused to sign for his supplies, nails, saw blades, and timber-curing salts, then watched as Jenkins unloaded them. Inside the cabin, Adam stirred up the fire, while the twins huddled together on his one spare chair, their shoulders touching. In the better light, he could see they were completely identical. Same green eyes, same slight build, same way of tilting their heads as they watched him move around the small space. "You boys hungry?" he asked, reaching for his soup pot. They nodded eagerly. As Adam began preparing a simple supper, he noticed they were clutching something in their hands, worn scraps of paper they treated with careful reverence. "What have you got there?" he asked, more to break the silence than anything else. "Hymns," one twin answered, holding out his paper. "From the nice lady at the asylum." Adam took the offered scrap, and his heart stopped. The familiar handwriting filled his vision, delicate loops and curves he would know anywhere. These weren't just any hymn lyrics. They were written in his mother's hand, the same songs she used to sing while working in her garden or cooking at her stove. His hands trembled slightly as he handed the paper back. Questions crowded his mind, but he pushed them aside for now. The boys needed feeding and warming up first. Everything else could wait until tomorrow. As he stirred the pot of soup, Adam couldn't help but notice how the twins watched his every move, their faces full of hope and trust he knew he hadn't earned. They sat close together, drawing strength from each other's presence, yet their eyes never left him for long. The cabin, which had always felt just right for one person, suddenly seemed smaller with 3 people in it, yet somehow it felt less empty too. The usual evening silence was broken by the soft whispers the twins shared, their occasional giggles, and the rustle of their precious hymn papers. Adam served up 3 bowls of soup, watching as the boys ate hungrily but carefully, using their spoons properly, and sharing the single piece of cornbread between them without arguing. Their manners spoke of good teaching, whatever their circumstances had been. "Thank you, Papa," they said together when they finished, and Adam felt something twist in his chest at the word. "Now look here," he started to say, meaning to correct them, but the words died in his throat as they turned those trusting eyes on him again. Instead, he found himself asking, "What are your names?" "I'm Matthew," said one. "I'm Mark," said the other. Biblical names, Adam thought, wondering if they'd been given them at the orphanage or if they'd come with them. Just one more question to add to the growing pile he needed answers for. As the evening grew later, Adam could see the boys fighting to keep their eyes open. He didn't have proper beds for them, but he made up a pallet near the fire with his spare blankets. The twins curled up together like puppies, still clutching their hymn scraps. "Good night, Papa," they murmured sleepily. Adam stood for a long time watching them sleep, their faces peaceful in the firelight. Tomorrow he would ride into town and sort out this confusion. Tomorrow he would make it clear that he couldn't be responsible for 2 young boys. Tomorrow he would set things right. But tonight, as the wind whistled around his cabin's eaves and the fire crackled softly, Adam found himself humming one of his mother's old hymns under his breath, the same hymn written on those worn scraps of paper the twins held so dear. He moved quietly to his own bed, but sleep was slow in coming. His mind kept circling back to those hymn scraps, his mother's distinctive handwriting, and the mystery of how they had ended up in the possession of two orphan boys who somehow knew to call him Papa. The coincidence seemed too great, yet he couldn't make sense of it. The night deepened, and occasional soft snores from the twins filled the cabin. Adam lay awake, feeling the weight of unexpected responsibility pressing down on him. He was a solitary man by choice, living high on this mountain to avoid the complications of town life. Now complications had found him anyway, in the form of two small boys who looked at him like he hung the moon. His mother would have known what to do, he thought. She always had answers for life's hard questions. But she was long gone, leaving only her hymns behind, hymns that had somehow found their way back to him in the hands of two orphaned twins. Outside, an owl called into the darkness. Inside, the fire settled with a soft crackle, and Adam finally drifted off to sleep, his dreams filled with his mother's singing and the echo of small voices calling him Papa. Morning frost glittered on the cabin roof like scattered sugar when Adam woke. The twins were already up, whispering together near the banked fire. In daylight, their matching faces showed signs of weariness beyond their years, though their eyes brightened when they saw him stir. "Mornin', Papa," they said in unison. Adam sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair. "About that. We need to talk." He pulled on his boots and moved to stoke the fire. "First off, I'm not your pa. Name's Adam Crowley, and while those papers might say different, there's been a mistake about me being your guardian." The smaller twin, they'd said their names were Ben and Will last night, though Adam wasn't sure which was which, clutched his brother's arm. "But we were told to come to Adam Crowley in the mountains. They said you'd keep us safe." "Who told you that?" Adam asked, pausing with the poker in his hand. The boys exchanged glances. "The lady at St. Bridget's," one answered. "She said we had to get to you before winter." Adam frowned. "Did she say why?" They shook their heads in perfect synchronization. "Just that you'd protect us," the quiet one, Will, Adam thought, whispered. "And you've never met me before?" Adam pressed, studying their faces for any hint of recognition. "No, sir," Ben replied, though he kept hold of his brother's arm. "But we knew it was you 'cause of the hymns." Adam's stomach tightened. Those hymn scraps in his mother's handwriting still bothered him. "We'll sort this out in town," he said firmly, turning back to the fire. "After breakfast, I'll hitch up the wagon and take you to Morrow Junction." Fear flashed across their small faces. "Please don't send us back," Will said, his voice barely audible. "Back where?" Adam asked, but the boys fell silent, pressing closer together. Sighing, Adam set about making breakfast, cornmeal mush with the last of his molasses. The twins ate quietly, stealing worried glances at him between bites. Despite his determination to remain detached, Adam found himself touched by their careful manners and the way they helped clean their bowls without being asked. Getting ready for the journey took longer than he'd planned. The wagon needed checking after yesterday's rough delivery, and the horses required extra warming up in the frosty morning. Adam packed food for the trip, hard biscuits, dried apple slices, and jerky, knowing the road to town would take most of the day. The boys watched him work, offering to help though their small hands could do little with the heavy equipment. When he lifted them into the wagon bed, they settled among the blankets he'd provided, still holding tight to each other and their precious hymn papers. The morning sun had climbed well past the mountain peaks by the time they set out. Adam kept the horses at a steady pace down the winding trail, conscious of his passengers in the back. Every so often he heard soft exclamations of wonder from the twins. "Look, Will, the snow's all sparkly." "Ben, see that bird? It's red as a berry." Their innocent enthusiasm for simple things made something ache in Adam's chest. He found himself answering their occasional questions about mountain life, why trees grew twisted near the peaks, how squirrels knew winter was coming, what made the wind sound different in pine versus aspen leaves. "You know an awful lot, Pa, Mr. Crowley," Ben said after one such explanation. "Just Adam is fine," he replied, then immediately regretted it when he saw hope bloom on their faces at this small concession. The journey stretched through the afternoon. Adam stopped once to rest the horses and share out some food. The boys ate their portions slowly, making each bite last, like children used to stretching meager meals. They also stayed close to the wagon, eyes darting to the forest's edge as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. The sun was setting by the time they reached Morrow Junction, painting the small town's buildings in deep gold. Adam headed straight for the telegraph office, wanting to sort out this guardian business immediately. As they passed the schoolhouse, a woman in a neat brown dress stepped out onto the porch. "Mr. Crowley?" she called, hurrying toward the wagon. "I'm Millie Wynn, the schoolteacher, and clerk for Sheriff Matthews," she added, her eyes fixed on the twins. "Those boys—" "You know them?" Adam asked, pulling the wagon to a stop. Millie nodded, her face serious. "There have been inquiries about missing children matching their description." She lowered her voice. "The telegraph came through 2 days ago." Adam felt the twins press against his back, small hands gripping his coat. "These two came from St. Bridget's Orphan Asylum," he explained. "There's been some mix-up with guardianship papers. I'm taking them to the telegraph office now to straighten it out." "I'm afraid that won't be possible tonight," Millie said, glancing at the darkening sky. "Mr. Peterson closed early. His lamp oil's running low and the new supply wagon is delayed." Adam frowned. "How long until it opens tomorrow?" 8 o'clock sharp, Millie replied. She studied the boys' tired faces. "The boarding house has a room, if you need a place for the night." "Much obliged," Adam said, though frustration simmered in his chest. Another delay meant another night responsible for 2 children who weren't his to care for. The boarding house sat at the end of the main street, its windows already glowing with lamplight. As Adam helped the twins down from the wagon, they swayed on, their feet exhausted from the long journey. Ben leaned heavily against him, while Will's eyes were already half closed. Mrs. Murphy, the boarding house owner, clucked sympathetically at the sight of them. "Poor lambs look done in," she said, leading them to a small room with 2 narrow beds. "Supper's still warm if you're hungry." But the twins were already climbing onto one bed, curling together like they had in Adam's cabin. They were asleep before he could even suggest they eat first. Adam stood in the doorway, watching their peaceful faces in the lamplight. Something about the papers from St. Bridget's nagged at him. The twins' fear of being sent back, their careful way of watching the forest, the mysterious instructions that led them to him. None of it felt like a simple clerical error. Millie appeared beside him, her voice soft. "Mr. Crowley? There's something you should know about those inquiries." Adam turned to her, noting the concern in her eyes. But before she could continue, Mrs. Murphy called from the kitchen about serving supper while it was hot. "Tomorrow," Millie said, "come to the schoolhouse before you visit the telegraph office, please." Adam nodded, glancing once more at the sleeping boys. Their small hands still clutched those hymn scraps, written in his mother's distinctive hand. The coincidence felt too precise, too deliberate. Whatever was going on, he had a growing certainty that these boys had been sent to him for a reason. He closed the door quietly, leaving them to their dreams. Tomorrow would bring answers, though perhaps not the simple ones he'd been expecting. Dawn crept over Morrow Junction, painting the frost-covered buildings in pale pink light. Adam stood outside the boarding house, adjusting the horses' harnesses, while he waited for the twins to finish their breakfast. The morning air bit sharp and clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke from nearby chimneys. The boarding house door creaked open, and Ben and Will emerged, bundled in the spare blankets Adam had wrapped around them. Their faces were still puffy with sleep, but their eyes grew alert as they spotted him. Without hesitation, they hurried to his side, small hands reaching for his coat. "Mornin', boys," Adam said quietly. "Ready to sort this out?" They nodded, though their grip on his coat tightened. Before he could lift them into the wagon, Millie Wynne approached from the direction of the schoolhouse, her boots clicking against the frozen ground. "Mr. Crowley," she called. "I thought I'd accompany you to the telegraph office. Mr. Peterson can be particular about his paperwork." Adam noticed how she glanced at the twins with concern. "Much obliged, Miss Wynne." The telegraph office sat at the corner of Main Street, its windows still dark. They waited in the crisp morning air until Mr. Peterson arrived, fumbling with his ring of keys. The operator was a thin man with ink-stained fingers who seemed put out by their early arrival. "Office doesn't properly open for another quarter hour," he grumbled, lighting the lamp on his desk. "This can't wait," Millie said firmly. Her tone made the operator straighten up and nod. Adam pulled out the guardianship papers from his coat. "I need to send a message to St. Bridget's Orphan Asylum about these boys. There's been some mistake." The twins pressed closer to his legs as Mr. Peterson examined the documents. The telegraph key clicked and clattered as the operator composed the message, asking for clarification about the guardianship arrangement. While they waited, Millie turned to Adam. "How long have you lived up in the mountains, Mr. Crowley?" "Going on 5 years now," he answered, noting how she studied his face. "Alone all that time?" "Mostly. Work crews in summer for the timber cutting." He shifted, uncomfortable with her gentle probing. "Did some ranch work before that, down in the valley?" Millie nodded thoughtfully. "And no connection to St. Bridget's? No family members who might have arranged this?" "None living," Adam said. His mother's hymn scraps felt heavy in his pocket where he'd stored them for safekeeping. Ben tugged at his coat. "We saw your name, Mr. Adam, on the paper with the songs. The lady said it was right." Before Adam could question this, the telegraph sparked to life. Mr. Peterson's pencil scratched across paper as he translated the incoming message. His eyebrows rose as he read. "St. Bridget's confirms the boys were dispatched correctly," he announced, "to their listed guardian, Adam Crowley of Timber Creek Pass." "That's impossible," Adam protested. "I never arranged—" "They're quite clear," Mr. Peterson interrupted, showing them the transcribed message. "Says here, documentation verified. Transfer of guardianship properly executed per institutional protocols." Millie frowned, reading over the response. The wording seems oddly formal, almost rehearsed. The telegraph clicked again, more urgently this time. Mr. Peterson's pencil flew across a fresh sheet. His face grew puzzled as he translated. "This is strange," he muttered. "Different sender. No identification given." He read aloud. "Boys must be returned immediately. Essential they be retrieved without delay. Await further instructions." The twins' fingers dug into Adam's legs. He felt them trembling. Millie touched his arm. "Mr. Crowley, I don't like this. Those inquiries I mentioned, they weren't official requests. More like people asking questions they shouldn't know to ask." Adam looked down at the boys, their faces pale with fear. Whatever was happening, his instincts screamed that something was wrong. Millie seemed to read his thoughts. "You should take them somewhere safe, at least until we can verify these messages properly." Back to my cabin, Adam decided. It's remote, defensible. We can wait there until… The office door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. 2 men stepped inside, brushing snow from their coats. Adam's neck prickled at the way their eyes fixed on the twins. "Pardon?" one man said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We're seeking information about 2 young boys. Might have passed through recently?" Millie stepped forward smoothly. "I'm afraid the telegraph office is closed for private business at the moment. Perhaps try the sheriff's office?" The men exchanged glances. "Much obliged, ma'am," the second man said. But Adam noticed how their gaze lingered on Ben and Will before they left. "We need to leave," Millie whispered. "Now." Adam nodded. "Boys, stay close. We're heading back to the cabin." They hurried to where he'd left the wagon. Adam lifted the twins into the back, making sure they were well covered with blankets. Millie helped him check the harnesses one last time. "I'll try to learn more about those messages," she promised. "Be careful, Mr. Crowley." Snow had begun falling, soft flakes that would soon blanket the road. Adam clicked to the horses, guiding them north toward the mountain pass. In the wagon bed, the twins huddled together, watching the town recede behind them. Through the swirling snow, Adam caught a glimpse of the 2 strangers mounted up, watching their departure. His hands tightened on the reins. The weather would slow their progress, but it would also cover their tracks. Right now, that seemed like a blessing. The wagon moved steadily through the thickening snow, carrying its precious cargo toward the safety of the mountains. Adam felt the weight of responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. These boys had been sent to him for a reason, and someone wanted them back badly enough to track them to Morrow Junction. Until he understood why, his cabin would have to be their sanctuary, and he would have to be their protector, whether he'd chosen the role or not. The snow fell harder, making the horses' hooves soundless on the road. Behind them, the town disappeared into white, taking with it the mysterious messages and the watching strangers. Ahead lay the familiar trail home, though home, Adam realized, would never be quite the same again. Sunset painted the snow-covered mountains in deep purple and gold as Adam's wagon finally crested the last rise before his homestead. The journey had taken far longer than usual, with the horses struggling through drifts that grew deeper by the hour. In the wagon bed, Ben and Will huddled beneath blankets, their faces red from the biting wind. "Almost there, boys," Adam called over his shoulder. The twins perked up at his voice, peering ahead eagerly. His cabin emerged from the gathering darkness, a solid structure of hewn logs with a stone chimney reaching skyward. Smoke still curled from the morning fire he'd banked before leaving, promising warmth within. The sight of it eased something in Adam's chest, though he couldn't shake the unease that had followed them from town. "That's your house?" Will asked, his quiet voice carrying over the crunch of snow beneath the wagon. "Wheels." "Our house now, I reckon," Adam replied, surprising himself with the words. "At least until we sort this business out." He helped the boys down from the wagon, their small boots leaving twin trails in the fresh snow. They stayed close as he unhitched the horses and led them into the barn's shelter. "Could you boys gather some kindling?" Adam asked, nodding toward the woodpile near the cabin. "Small pieces, mind you, nothing too heavy." Their faces lit up at being given a task. They scampered off, carefully selecting twigs and small branches, working together with the easy coordination of long practice. Adam watched them while he tended to the horses, noting how they checked each piece with serious concentration. The sound of hoofbeats brought his head up sharply. He reached for his rifle before recognizing Millie Wynn's dappled mare emerging from the trees. She'd taken the old hunting trail, a steeper but more direct route than the wagon road. "Mr. Crowley," she called, dismounting quickly. Her face was grave. 3 men rode out just after you left. They were armed, asking directions to Timber Creek Pass. Adam's jaw tightened. He glanced at the twins, still focused on their kindling collection. The same men from the telegraph office? Yes, and another. Millie brushed snow from her skirt. Something about them. They weren't ordinary travelers. The way they checked their weapons, how they moved, they're used to violence. The twins had noticed Millie's arrival. They abandoned their kindling pile and hurried over, pressing against Adam's legs. He felt their trembling. "Let's get inside," he said. "Storm's picking up anyway." The cabin's interior was cold, but soon Adam had a fire blazing in the hearth. The boys helped Millie arrange bedding near the warmth, while Adam prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread. The domesticity of the scene felt strange after years of solitude, but not unwelcome. "Papa used to sing when he cooked," Ben said suddenly, then ducked his head as if afraid he'd spoken out of turn. Adam paused in his stirring. "Your real pa?" Will shook his head. "No, the nice man at the orphanage, before the bad ones came." Millie caught Adam's eye, but before she could question further, a horse nickered outside, not one of theirs. The twins froze, their faces draining of color. "Under the bed," Adam commanded softly. "Quick now and quiet as mice." They obeyed instantly, scrambling into the shadows. Adam took down his Winchester rifle from its pegs, checking the action with practiced hands. Millie moved to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. 3 riders, she whispered, circling the clearing. Adam stepped onto the porch, rifle ready but pointed downward. He lifted a lantern high, its light catching on snow and tree branches. "Who's there?" "Friends from St. Bridget's," a voice called back. A man emerged from the darkness, leading his horse. 2 more figures flanked him, just visible at the edge of the light. "We've come for the boys." "Mighty late for a social call," Adam replied evenly. His finger rested near the trigger. "And St. Bridget's already confirmed their placement here." The leader smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "There's been a mistake in the paperwork. We're here to correct it." Inside, Adam heard a muffled whimper. Through the door, Millie's voice soothed softly, calming the twins. "Those boys are under my protection," Adam said. The words felt right, solid as the rifle in his hands. "Any papers you have can wait for daylight and proper authorities." "Now, Mr. Crowley," the man's tone hardened, "don't make this difficult. We're taking what belongs to us." The phrase sent ice through Adam's veins. Children belonging to someone, like property? His rifle came up smoothly, the action cycling with a sharp click. "Take one more step, and I'll show you difficult." He fired high, the shot cracking through the night air. Snow fell from branches, and somewhere an owl took flight. The leader's horse reared, but he controlled it easily. His companions' hands went to their holsters. "You're making a mistake," the man said softly. "We'll be back to collect what's ours. Count on it." He wheeled his horse around, melting into the darkness. His companions followed, their threats hanging in the cold air. Adam waited until the hoofbeats faded before lowering his rifle. Inside, he found Millie kneeling by the bed, speaking gentle words to the twins. Their small faces peered out from the shadows, tear-streaked but determined. "They hurt people," Will whispered. "At the orphanage. We saw them." Ben nodded. "They took other kids away. The nice ones who helped us hide said we had to run." Millie stood, her face set with quiet anger. "This confirms it. These men aren't from any orphanage. They're criminals. The missing children reports, the strange questions in town, they're trafficking innocent lives." Adam ran a hand over his face. feeling the weight of what they'd uncovered. The twins crawled out from under the bed, immediately pressing against his legs. Their trust humbled him, even as it strengthened his resolve. "You'll stay here," he told them, resting his hands on their small shoulders. "No one's taking you anywhere." "Promise?" Ben asked, his voice quavering. "Promise," Adam replied firmly. He looked at Millie, seeing his own determination mirrored in her eyes. "We'll need help, though. Legal help." She nodded. "I'll ride to the county seat tomorrow, speak with the circuit judge. He needs to know what's happening, and I'll send telegrams to proper authorities about St. Bridget's." The fire crackled, throwing warm light across the cabin's walls. Outside, snow continued falling, covering any trace of the rider's passage. Adam knew they'd return. Men like that always did. But for now, his home was secure, and the boys were safe. He helped them prepare for bed, noting how they relaxed once they were settled near the hearth. Their eyes grew heavy as Millie hummed a hymn, one of the same ones written on those paper scraps they'd carried. "Mr. Adam?" Will murmured, half asleep. "Thank you for protecting us." "Rest now," Adam said softly. "You're safe here." He watched them drift off, their small faces peaceful in sleep. The night's events had changed everything. His solitary life, his plans for winter, his very purpose. But looking at those two innocent faces, he knew he'd made the right choice. Millie touched his arm gently. "You're doing the right thing, Mr. Crowley." "Reckon I am," he agreed, "though I never expected to become a father to twins in the space of 2 days." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she said, smiling. "Sometimes he knows what we need better than we do." Adam nodded, thinking of his mother's hymns, now connecting him to these boys in ways he couldn't yet understand. He checked his rifle one more time and settled in for a long night's watch, ready to defend his unexpected family. The morning sun crept over the mountain ridge, painting the snow-dusted clearing in pale gold. Adam stirred the coals and added fresh kindling, watching as the twins slept curled together near the hearth. Their small faces were peaceful now, but he knew the hard questions ahead would disturb that peace. Millie emerged from the back room where she'd rested, her hair neatly pinned despite the early hour. She caught Adam's eye and nodded slightly. It was time. "Boys," Adam called softly, "time to wake up." They stirred almost immediately, as if they'd been sleeping lightly. Will's eyes opened first, quickly scanning the cabin before relaxing at the sight of Adam. Ben yawned and stretched, then both boys sat up, clutching their blankets. "Would you like some breakfast first?" Millie asked, already reaching for the cornmeal. Ben shook his head. "Not hungry?" he whispered, an admission that spoke volumes about his anxiety. Adam pulled up a chair, trying to appear less imposing. "We need to talk about who sent you here," he said gently. "About why you were hidden in that crate." The twins exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Ben spoke, his voice trembling. "Mama hid us. She said we had to go away fast before they found us." "Who was trying to find you?" Millie asked, kneeling beside them. Will's lower lip quivered. "Bad men. They came to our house at night. Mama told us to be quiet as church mice and put us in the root cellar." "She was crying," Ben added, his small hands twisting in the blanket. "But she said we had to be brave, like Papa was brave." Adam leaned forward slightly. "And who told you to come find me specifically?" "The nice man at the orphanage," Will said. "He said you were the one who doesn't let evil win, that you'd keep us safe." Millie's face paled at these words. She stood abruptly and moved to the window, her hands clasped tightly. Adam noticed her reaction but kept his focus on the boys. This man at the orphanage, he pressed carefully. Did he tell you his name? The twins stiffened. Ben shook his head violently while Will seemed to shrink into himself. We're not supposed to say it, Ben whispered. They'll hear us if we say it. They told us never to speak it, Will added, trembling now. Bad things happen when people say his name. Adam shared a look with Millie, who had turned back from the window. Her face held a mixture of realization and dread. Mr. Crowley, she said quietly. May I speak with you outside? Adam nodded. Boys, stay here where it's warm. We'll be right back. They stepped onto the porch, closing the door softly behind them. The morning air was crisp, their breath fogging in the cold. I think I know who they're speaking of, Millie said, her voice low and urgent. The way they react, their fear of speaking the name. It matches the reports about Marshal Elias Grant's children. The disgraced Marshal? Adam frowned. The one they say turned outlaw? Millie nodded. He was investigating land fraud cases, protection rackets targeting homesteaders. Then suddenly he was accused of taking bribes, helping criminals. It never sat right with those who knew him. And you think these boys are his sons, she finished, who disappeared after his wife's death. The official story claimed they died in a fire, but there were whispers. Adam looked back through the window where the twins sat huddled together, sharing quiet words. Someone wanted them found and sent here. To me. But why? Perhaps because you're known for standing against corruption, Millie suggested. Your testimony in the Miller case last year helped expose those crooked lumber dealers. The realization settled heavily on Adam's shoulders. This was no accident, no clerical error. Someone had orchestrated the boy's arrival, believing he would protect them. The day progressed with forced normalcy. Adam split wood, the rhythmic thunk of his axe echoing across the clearing. Millie kept the boys occupied inside, teaching them simple sums and letters. Occasionally, their small laughter drifted out to where Adam worked, momentarily lightening the weight of their situation. Will proved to have a quick mind for numbers, while Ben showed a talent for remembering stories. They gradually relaxed under Millie's gentle guidance, though they still startled at unexpected sounds. Near midday, Adam paused in his work to watch them through the window. Millie had them helping to knead dough, their small hands covered in flour as they giggled at their own messiness. The scene stirred something in his chest, a longing he'd thought long buried. Later, as the sun began its descent behind the mountains, Adam and Millie met again on the porch while the boys napped. We can't take them back to town, Millie said firmly. Not until we know who's hunting them and why. Adam nodded. Agreed. But we need more information. Those men who came last night weren't simple orphanage workers. I have. Contacts in the county seat, Millie offered. People who worked with Marshal Grant. They might know something. It's dangerous, Adam warned. If these men are willing to threaten children. Sometimes doing right is dangerous, she replied steadily. But it must be done anyway. Inside, they heard movement as the twins woke from their nap. Adam watched them through the window, noting how they immediately checked for his presence. We'll need supplies, he said. Winter's coming on hard, and I'm not stocked for 4 people. I can bring provisions when I return from making inquiries, Millie said, but you'll need to be extra vigilant while I'm gone. Adam's hand brushed his rifle. I reckon I can manage that. As evening settled over the mountain, Millie prepared to leave, promising to return within 3 days. The boys clung to her skirts until she assured them multiple times she would come back. After a simple supper, Adam helped the twins prepare for bed. They insisted on sleeping near the hearth again, their small forms wrapped in quilts Millie had brought from her house in town. Mr. Adam? Ben asked sleepily. Will you sing like Papa used to?" Adam hesitated, then cleared his throat. Softly, he began one of his mother's old hymns, the same one written on the scraps of paper the boys had carried. To his surprise, they joined in with the chorus, their young voices bringing new life to the familiar words. When they finally drifted off, Adam noticed they'd tucked those precious hymn scraps beneath their hands, as if drawing comfort from the connection to their past. He settled into his chair by the fire, rifle across his lap. The night stretched ahead, full of shadows and uncertainty. But watching the twins sleep peacefully, their faces softened by firelight, he knew his course was set. Someone had trusted him to protect these boys, believing he would stand against whatever evil pursued them. As he maintained his vigil, Adam silently vowed to prove that trust well placed. The fire crackled softly, and somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The twins slept on, their hymn scraps held tight, while their unlikely guardian watched over them through the long mountain night. The mountain morning dawned crisp and clear, frost painting delicate patterns on the cabin windows. Adam rose early, as was his habit, to find the twins already awake and watching him with eager eyes from their bedrolls near the hearth. "Reckon it's time you boys learned how things work up here," Adam said, pulling on his heavy coat. "Mountain living ain't like town living. Everything's got its proper way." Ben and Will scrambled to their feet, nearly tripping over each other in their haste to follow him. Millie, who had taken the spare cot in the lean-to, emerged wrapped in a shawl. "First rule," Adam began, his breath visible in the cold air, "is keeping warm." He demonstrated how to stack kindling just so, explaining the importance of dry wood and proper airflow. The twins watched intently, their small faces serious with concentration. "Like this?" Will asked, carefully arranging sticks in a teepee shape. "That's right," Adam nodded, surprised by how quickly the boy grasped it. "Now, Ben, you try." Ben's attempt was less precise, but his determination was clear. Adam found himself adding gentle corrections instead of the gruff dismissal he might have used with hired hands. "Second rule is keeping safe," Adam continued. He showed them how to check the oil level in the lantern, explaining how darkness came swift and sudden in the mountains. "Always keep it full. Light's precious up here." "Papa," Ben started, then caught himself. "I mean, Mr. Adam, can we help carry wood?" Adam's chest tightened at the slip, but he kept his voice steady. "Reckon you can. Small pieces only, mind. Stack them neat by the door." The boys threw themselves into the task, working together to carry armloads of kindling. Their boots crunched through the frost as they made trip after trip, eager to prove themselves useful. Millie watched from the doorway, a knowing smile touching her lips. "They're natural helpers," she observed quietly. "Might be," Adam admitted. "Still don't make them mine." But even as he said it, he found himself reaching out to steady Will when the boy stumbled under his load. The touch came naturally, protective. By mid-morning, Millie had established a makeshift classroom at the rough-hewn table. She'd brought primers and slate boards from town, and the twins proved attentive students. 7 + 4 equals, Millie prompted. 11, Will answered quickly, while Ben carefully counted it out on his fingers. "Very good," Millie praised. "Now, who can spell mountain?" Adam tried to focus on mending harness leather, but found himself listening to their lessons. The boys' eager voices and Millie's patient responses filled the cabin with an unfamiliar warmth. When the sun reached its peak, Adam called a halt to the lessons. "Time you learned something else important," he said, "following me, quiet as you can." He led them into the woods surrounding the cabin, Millie bringing up the rear. The boys tried to mimic his careful steps, though their excitement made true stealth impossible. "Up here," Adam explained in a low voice. "Sometimes you need to hide. Maybe from a bear, maybe from men who mean harm. Either way, you need to know how." The twins' faces grew solemn at this, and Adam wondered what memories his words stirred. "Watch where I step," he continued. "Quiet feet, slow movements, like this." He demonstrated moving through brush without disturbing branches. For the next hour, they practiced stalking through the forest. The boys improved quickly, their small size actually an advantage in moving unseen. Adam showed them how to use trees for cover, how to freeze in place when necessary. "Why are you teaching them this?" Millie asked softly when the twins were occupied studying a rabbit's trail. "Because those men will come back," Adam replied, his jaw tight. "And next time they might not announce themselves first." Millie nodded, her face troubled. They learned so quickly, almost like they've had practice hiding before. The thought sat heavy between them as they watched the boys carefully placing their feet in Adam's boot prints. Dark clouds began building over the peaks early afternoon, promising a storm. Adam called an end to the woods lesson, hurrying them all back to the cabin. "Storm's coming," he announced. "Time to learn about battening down." He showed them how to check the shutters, making sure each was secure. The twins worked together, one holding the shutter while the other worked the latch. "Good job, boys," Adam found himself saying more than once. Their faces glowed at the praise, reminding him of how little approval they must have known lately. Millie organized them into an assembly line, passing supplies from the outdoor storage into the cabin. Even the smallest tasks seemed to delight the twins, who treated each chore like a grand adventure. "Look, Mr. Adam," Ben called proudly. "We're helping." "That you are?" Adam agreed, surprising himself with a small smile. The wind picked up as evening approached, rattling the shutters they'd secured. Millie prepared a simple supper of beans and cornbread, teaching the boys how to set the table properly. "Careful with them plates," Adam cautioned when Will wobbled slightly. "They're thin tin, bend easy." "Yes, sir," Will replied seriously. "We'll be real careful." After they'd eaten, the twins disappeared into their corner for a time, whispering and working on something they wouldn't show. The storm grew stronger outside, wind moaning through the pine trees. "Mr. Adam?" Ben approached shyly, hands behind his back. "We made something. For you." Will joined his brother, and together they presented their creation, a small wooden cross, carved somewhat crudely from kindling pieces. They'd bound it together with string, clearly having put great effort into making it stable. "See," Ben pointed proudly, "like the one in the church in town." "We wanted to thank you," Will added softly, "for keeping us safe." Adam stared at the humble gift, emotion thick in his throat. He'd lived alone so long, focused only on survival. This simple offering of gratitude, this childish attempt to make something beautiful in the midst of danger, struck him deep. "That's..." He had to clear his throat. "That's right, fine work, boys." Millie watched from her place by the fire as Adam carefully took the cross, handling it like it was made of fine glass instead of rough wood. The twins beamed at his acceptance, their need for connection, for family, clear in every line of their small bodies. Later, after the boys had been tucked into their bedrolls, Millie joined Adam by the window. The storm lashed the trees outside, but inside was warm and quiet save for the twins' soft breathing. "You're good with them," she observed. "Natural, almost." Adam shook his head. "Never meant to be anyone's father. Wouldn't know how." "Sometimes," Millie said gently, "we don't choose our calling. Sometimes it chooses us." Adam's hand strayed to the pocket where he'd carefully stored the crude wooden cross. "They deserve better than a broken-down mountain man." They deserve someone who'll protect them, Millie countered. Someone who'll teach them to survive, to be strong. She paused, then added softly, someone who'll love them. Adam didn't respond, but his gaze drifted to the sleeping boys. Will had one arm thrown protectively over his brother, their faces peaceful in sleep. Something in his chest ached at the sight. The wind howled outside, making the lamp flame dance. Millie wrapped her shawl tighter, her face troubled despite the domestic scene. They'll come again, she said quietly. The men who want them. Yes, Adam agreed, his hand moving instinctively toward his rifle. But they'll find us ready. The twins shifted in their sleep, mumbling something about Papa. Adam felt that now familiar tightness in his chest. He'd never meant to become anyone's father, never thought to have a family. But watching these two brave, desperate boys who trusted him so completely, he knew something was changing in his heart. The wooden cross in his pocket seemed to carry the weight of that trust, that hope for belonging. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the cabin, a different kind of change was brewing. The slow, steady growth of family bonds, forming despite fear and uncertainty. Millie observed all this with knowing eyes, hope warring with worry in her expression. The gang would indeed return, bringing violence to this fragile peace they'd found. But for now, in the storm-wrapped cabin, they were safe. The twins slept on, secure in the presence of their chosen protector, while Adam kept his vigil, gradually accepting the mantle of responsibility he'd never sought, but could no longer deny. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, catching dust motes dancing in the air. Millie sat at the rough-hewn table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. Adam could see she had something weighing on her mind. I need to tell you what I suspect about the boys, she said quietly, glancing at the twins who were still asleep in their corner. I've been turning it over all night. Adam pulled up a chair, the wood creaking beneath him. Go on. Last spring I was organizing old wanted posters in the sheriff's office, Millie began. There was one that caught my attention. Marshal Elias Grant. She paused, watching Adam's reaction. The sketch showed a man with two young sons, boys who look remarkably like Ben and Will. Adam's gaze shifted to the sleeping twins. Now that Millie mentioned it, he could see a resemblance to the stern-faced lawman he remembered from occasional visits to town. But Grant was declared an outlaw, Adam said, keeping his voice low. Accused of taking bribes, wasn't he? Millie shook her head. That's the official story. But there were whispers, things I overheard while filing court documents. Grant was investigating something big, something involving illegal land seizures from native families along the proposed railroad expansion. The coffee pot bubbled on the stove, filling the silence as Adam absorbed this information. Outside, morning birds called to each other in the crisp air. About 2 months before he disappeared, Millie continued, Grant started sending packets of information to people he trusted. The railway consortium was using forged documents to claim native lands, then selling them at massive profit to Eastern investors. And you think the boy's mother was one of his contacts? It would explain why they were sent to you specifically. Millie leaned forward. You have a reputation, Adam. Everyone knows you stood up to the cattle barons when they tried pushing homesteaders off their land last year. Movement from the twins' corner interrupted them. Ben and Will stirred, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Adam rose to stir the morning porridge, while Millie helped the boys wash up. Over breakfast, the twins grew animated as they spooned honey over their porridge. Mama said we should remember the verses Papa taught us, Will said suddenly, for when we're scared. Ben nodded eagerly. Like Psalm 23. Millie exchanged a meaningful look with Adam. Your father taught you Bible verses? Lots of them, Ben confirmed. He said they'd keep us safe. Did he have any special way of teaching them to you? Millie asked carefully. Will furrowed his brow in concentration. He'd make us say them real careful, same way every time, and sometimes he'd have us count words. Adam noticed Millie's eyes sharpen with interest. Could you show me how? She asked. The boys demonstrated, reciting a passage with peculiar emphasis on certain words. Millie listened intently, her expression growing more certain. Adam, she said when they'd finished, I think these aren't just scripture passages. They might be coded messages, directions to whatever evidence Grant gathered against the railway consortium. Adam remembered stories of war messages hidden in innocent-seeming letters. The kind of evidence that could clear his name? Millie nodded. And expose everyone involved in the land scheme. The morning had turned bright and clear, the storm clouds of yesterday nothing but memory. Millie stood, straightening her skirts. I keep copies of land sale records and court documents in my desk at the schoolhouse. If we're going to understand what Grant uncovered, I'll need them. It's risky, Adam warned. Those men could still be watching the town. I'll be careful, Millie promised. I can be back before nightfall. While Millie saddled her horse, Adam helped the boys feed the chickens. They showed surprising gentleness with the birds, speaking softly and moving slowly so as not to startle them. My mama used to sing hymns while she did morning chores, Adam found himself saying. The memory rose unexpectedly, clear as yesterday, though she'd been gone 5 years now. Our mama too, Ben exclaimed. Will began humming a familiar tune, one that made Adam's throat tighten. It was the same melody he remembered from his childhood. Be Thou My Vision, his mother's favorite. Millie mounted up, checking her saddlebags one last time. I'll take the back trail, she said. Less likely to be noticed that way. Adam watched her ride away, the boys waving until she disappeared among the trees. The morning passed slowly. He kept the twins busy with small tasks, gathering kindling, sorting nails, learning to identify different types of wood by their grain. After their midday meal, both boys grew drowsy. Adam settled them for a nap, their small faces peaceful in sleep. In the quiet cabin, he found himself humming that old hymn again. His mother had sung it through good times and bad, through drought and plenty. She'd had a way of finding hope in the darkest moments. Adam wondered what she would make of his current situation. A confirmed bachelor suddenly responsible for 2 young boys who carried more secrets than most grown men. The afternoon shadows were lengthening when Millie's horse appeared on the trail. Adam's relief at seeing her return safely turned to concern when he noticed her worried expression. There were men asking questions in town, she reported as soon as she'd dismounted. Strangers, well-dressed but wearing gun belts. They were especially interested in any children who might have passed through recently. Adam helped her unload several leather-bound ledgers from her saddlebags. Did anyone recognize them? No, but they carried themselves like lawmen, or men used to having authority. Millie glanced toward the cabin where the twins were helping set the table for supper. They're getting closer, Adam. We can't stay here much longer. Adam nodded grimly. I know, but we need to understand what we're dealing with first. He gestured to the ledgers. What did you find? Millie opened one of the books, pointing to a series of entries. Land sales all along the proposed railroad route. Every one of them dated just after Native families were forced to relocate due to safety concerns that were never properly documented. And Grant was investigating this? He must have found proof the safety reports were fabricated. Millie turned several pages. These transactions would have made certain people very wealthy, and very worried about exposure. The twins called from the cabin doorway that supper was ready. Adam and Millie gathered the ledgers, both knowing they had hard decisions ahead. Inside, Ben and Will had carefully laid out tin plates and cups, looking pleased with their effort. Adam felt that now familiar tightness in his chest, watching them try so hard to be helpful, to earn their place in his home. "You did. A fine job," he told them, and their faces lit up at the praise. Over their simple meal of beans and cornbread, Millie and Adam exchanged worried glances. The boys picked up on their tension, growing quieter than usual. "Are the bad men coming back?" Will finally asked in a small voice. Adam reached across the table and squeezed his small hand. "We won't let them hurt you," he promised. The words came easily now, his initial reluctance to involve himself in their lives completely forgotten. Millie pulled out a sheet of paper and began making notes about the scripture passages the twins had recited. "We need to decode these messages," she said. "They might tell us where your father hid his evidence." "But we'll need to move soon," Adam added. "Somewhere safer than here." The boys nodded solemnly, trust evident in their eyes. They had already learned that safety meant being ready to run, yet somehow they maintained their childish resilience. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Adam checked the shutters one more time, making sure everything was secure for the night. Millie spread the ledgers across the table, ready to begin their research. The twins settled by the fire with their wooden toys, occasionally humming that haunting hymn tune. Adam caught Millie watching him as he listened to it. "That melody means something to you?" she observed quietly. "My mother's favorite," he admitted. "Sang it every morning while she worked. Hearing the boys sing it." He trailed off, unable to fully express how it affected him. Millie smiled softly. "Perhaps it's not just coincidence that brought them to you." Adam considered this as he stoked the fire. The boys had arrived in that crate like an answer to a prayer he hadn't known he was making, filling an emptiness he'd grown too used to carrying. Now, watching them play quietly by the firelight, he knew with certainty that he would do whatever it took to protect them. The conspiracy surrounding their father, the dangerous men searching for them, the coded messages in Scripture. All of it had become his responsibility the moment they tumbled into his life. Millie began sorting through the ledgers, her finger tracing down columns of numbers and dates. The twins gradually grew sleepy, curling up in their usual spot with their hymn papers clutched tight. "We need to figure this out quickly," Millie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Those men in town, they're getting too close." Adam nodded, knowing she was right. Their peaceful routine of the past few days couldn't last. Soon they would need to make hard choices about where to go, who to trust, how to keep the boys safe while unraveling the mystery of their father's disappearance. But for now, in the warm cabin with the fire crackling and the twins sleeping soundly, Adam allowed himself to feel grateful for this unexpected family he'd found. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight they were safe, together, and determined to protect what mattered most. The morning sun pierced through frost-glazed windows, casting diamond patterns across the cabin floor. Adam stirred the banked coals in the hearth, adding fresh logs while the twins still slumbered beneath their woolen blankets. The bitter cold had settled in overnight, turning the world outside brittle and sharp. Millie emerged from the small back room she'd claimed, her shawl wrapped tight. "Feels like winter's coming early this year," she observed, moving to help with breakfast preparations. The smell of coffee and frying bacon soon roused the boys. They tumbled from their bedrolls, faces bright despite the chill. Will immediately went to help Millie set out tin plates, while Ben pressed close to Adam's side, watching the fire dance. "Got some work needs doing today," Adam told them over breakfast. "Roof beams worked loose near the chimney. Could use some help with that." Both boys straightened, eager to be useful. "Can we really help?" Ben asked, hope shining in his eyes. "Reckon so," Adam replied. "Need someone small enough to pass me tools while I'm up in the rafters." Will looked uncertain. "What if we drop something?" "Then we'll pick it up," Adam said simply. "Part of learning is making mistakes sometimes." Millie smiled at this exchange, while she cleared away the breakfast things. "I'll get some stew started," she said. "Nothing better than hot food on a cold day." The morning passed in steady work. Adam positioned his ladder carefully, showing the boys how to brace it properly. They watched with solemn attention as he demonstrated which tools he'd need. "Hammer," he'd call down, and Ben would carefully select it from the toolbox. "Nails," and Will would count out exactly 3, just as Adam had shown him. The work went slower with small helpers, but Adam found he didn't mind. Their earnest desire to assist touched something deep in his heart, something he'd thought long buried beneath years of solitude. Near midday, Ben tugged at Adam's pant leg. "Can I see from up high?" Adam hesitated only a moment before lifting the boy onto his shoulders. Ben gasped in delight at the view through the cabin's upper window. "Look, Will! You can see forever!" Will watched from below, torn between wanting to join his brother and staying safely on the ground. Millie paused in her cooking to witness the scene, her eyes soft with understanding. The smell of simmering stew filled the cabin, rich with root vegetables and dried herbs. The warm aroma seemed to make the space more home-like, drawing them all together around the worn table for the midday meal. "Miss Millie," Will said shyly as they ate, "I practiced my letters like you showed me." He produced a carefully folded paper from his pocket, covered in neat rows of handwriting. Millie examined the page with genuine appreciation. "This is wonderful work, Will. Your letters are getting very even." The boy's face glowed with pride. Ben immediately asked for paper to practice too, not wanting to be outdone by his brother. After the meal, they returned to the roof repair. The work went steadily, punctuated by the rhythmic tap of Adam's hammer and the boys' quiet conversations as they sorted nails and handed up tools. Late afternoon found them all gathered near the hearth as the day's light began to fade. Millie had been humming as she worked, and now she began to sing in earnest, a familiar hymn that made the twins perk up immediately. "Mama sang that one," Ben exclaimed. "Would you like to sing it together?" Millie asked, and both boys nodded eagerly. Adam listened as their young voices joined Millie's, the simple melody filling the cabin with unexpected warmth. He recognized it as the same hymn his mother had favored, and something in his chest eased at the sound. The fire crackled companionably as darkness settled outside. They gathered close to its warmth, sharing stories as if they'd done this all their lives instead of just a few short days. "Tell about the big snow," Ben prompted, and Adam found himself describing winters past, when drifts rose higher than the cabin windows, and wolves sang in the distance. Millie spoke of her first teaching position, in a one-room schoolhouse where the children had to share 3 battered primers between them. "But they were so eager to learn," she remembered, "just like you two." The twins grew quiet then, but Will finally spoke. "Mama used to read to us," he said softly. "Every night, even when we had to be extra quiet." "She made different voices for all the characters," Ben added, his small face both sad and fond with the memory. Adam felt a familiar ache at their words. He'd lost his own mother too soon as well. Without thinking, he reached out to smooth Ben's tousled hair. The boy leaned into his touch trustingly. The evening deepened. Millie produced paper and pencils, teaching the boys to draw simple shapes while Adam worked on his ledgers. The familiar scratch of pencils and pop of the fire created a peaceful rhythm. One by one, the boys' heads began to droop. They fought sleep stubbornly until Adam suggested they all rest a bit. Within minutes, both twins were curled against him, their breathing deep and even. Millie watched this tableau with gentle understanding. "It looks like a real home now," she said softly. Adam glanced around the cabin, at the boys' drawings tacked to the wall, their small boots by the door, the wooden toys they'd carved together scattered across the floor. Everything that had seemed so ordinary just days ago now held new meaning. He couldn't deny it anymore. This weather-worn cabin had transformed into something he'd never expected to have again. A home filled with the warmth of family and shared care. The fire burned low, casting soft shadows across the sleeping boys' faces. Their complete trust in him was humbling. Somehow, in just these few days, they'd worked their way past all his careful defenses. Millie gathered her shawl, preparing to retire to her room. "Good night," she whispered. Adam nodded, unwilling to move and disturb the peaceful scene. He would sit a while longer, keeping watch over these unexpected gifts that had arrived in a freight wagon and changed everything. The night settled gentle and deep around the cabin. Inside, the four of them had found something precious, a belonging none had been looking for, but all had needed. Whatever dangers still lurked beyond their walls could wait until tomorrow. For now, there was only this quiet moment of grace. Dawn painted the mountain peaks in pale gold as Millie saddled her horse. The morning air bit sharp and clean, frost crunching beneath her boots. Adam stood in the cabin doorway, watching her preparations with concern etched on his weathered face. "I'll be careful," she assured him, adjusting her shawl. "Just a quick trip to gather news and supplies." "Take the Winchester," Adam insisted, bringing out the polished rifle. "Better to have it and not need it." Millie nodded, securing the weapon to her saddle. The boys appeared beside Adam, still drowsy-eyed in their nightshirts. "You'll come back?" Will asked anxiously. "Before sundown," Millie promised. "Meanwhile, mind what Adam tells you." She mounted smoothly and turned her horse toward town. The gelding's hooves kicked up small clouds of frost as they descended the mountain trail. Behind her, the cabin grew smaller until the trees swallowed it completely. Adam watched until Millie disappeared from view. The boys pressed close against his legs, seeking reassurance in his solid presence. "Well now," he said, looking down at their worried faces. "Reckon it's time you learned something useful. Ever tracked rabbits before?" Their eyes brightened with interest. After a quick breakfast and chores, Adam led them to a clearing where fresh snow had fallen overnight. He knelt, pointing to distinctive marks in the white powder. "See here? That's rabbit sign." He traced the delicate impressions with one finger. "Front paws land like this, back ones here. You can tell which way they're headed by the direction of the prints." The twins studied the tracks intently. Ben dropped to his hands and knees for a closer look, while Will sketched the pattern in the snow with a stick. "Why do some look deeper?" Ben asked. "Good eye," Adam approved. "Deeper means fresher. Older tracks start filling in with snow or settling." They spent the morning following various animal signs, deer trails, bird tracks, even the passing mark of a fox. The boys proved quick studies, their natural curiosity making them eager learners. Adam found himself enjoying their excitement over each new discovery. Near midday, they returned to the cabin for a simple lunch of beans and cornbread. Adam showed them how to clean their boots properly before coming inside, a lesson his own father had taught him long ago. The afternoon stretched quiet and cold. Adam kept the boys occupied with indoor tasks, teaching them to splice rope and mend tears in their clothes. All the while, his ears stayed tuned for the sound of approaching hoofbeats. When Millie finally returned, her horse's flanks were lathered from hard riding. Adam knew something was wrong before she even dismounted. "Get inside," she said tersely, leading her horse to the lean-to. "We need to talk." The boys exchanged worried glances but went in without protest. Adam helped Millie stable her horse, noting her taut expression. "What did you learn?" Millie's voice dropped low. "I was at the general store when Deputy Briggs came in with another man I didn't recognize. They were talking about forged custody papers for dangerous minors that needed collecting." Adam's jaw tightened. "The men who came before." "Has to be. They mentioned having official authority to retrieve the children." Millie's hands twisted in her skirt. "Adam, they're planning something. We can't stay here." Inside the cabin, they spoke in hushed tones while the boys played with wooden figures Adam had carved. Millie described overhearing more details about armed men gathering in town and mentions of cleaning up loose ends. "There's a trapping cabin," Adam said after consideration. 2 hours west, well hidden in a narrow valley. We could reach it by morning if we leave at first light." Millie nodded. "The boys?" "They're stronger than they look. They can manage it." They prepared a hearty supper of salt pork and potatoes, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for the twins' sake. Afterward, Adam began gathering essentials, while Millie helped the boys fold blankets and sort through their few belongings. "Just the needful things," Adam instructed. "We'll travel light." Will carefully wrapped their mother's hymn papers in a clean handkerchief. Ben gathered the wooden figures, looking to Adam for permission to bring them. "One each," Adam said gently. "Choose your favorites." The cabin grew quieter as evening deepened into night. Adam checked his rifle and pistol, making sure both were cleaned and loaded. Millie packed medical supplies and dried food into saddlebags, her movements quick and efficient. The boys worked together to fold blankets into tight rolls, their small faces serious with concentration. Despite their youth, they seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Just before midnight, the dogs began barking, sharp, alert sounds that made everyone freeze. Adam moved silently to the window, peering out into the darkness. Through the trees, lantern light bobbed and weaved, multiple lights moving with purpose toward the cabin. More riders than before, and they weren't bothering to hide their approach. "Root cellar," Adam whispered urgently. "Now!" Millie gathered the boys while Adam quickly extinguished the lamps. Darkness fell heavy inside the cabin, broken only by faint moonlight through the windows. The twins moved without a sound, well practiced from their earlier life of hiding. Millie guided them toward the trap door while Adam collected his weapons. The dogs' barking grew more intense. Through the window, Adam counted at least 6 lanterns, too many to fight off alone. He heard the soft creak of the root cellar door opening, followed by quiet footsteps descending. The boys would be safe below ground, hidden behind the winter stores of potatoes and preserved vegetables. Outside, a horse whickered. The lantern lights drew steadily closer through the trees. Adam moved toward the root cellar, his rifle ready. Whatever came next, he would protect these children who had been entrusted to his care. The night pressed close around the cabin, thick with tension and approaching danger. In the root cellar's musty darkness, Adam held his breath. Overhead, boots crunched in the frozen snow, circling the cabin with deliberate purpose. Millie pressed herself against the earthen wall, one arm around each twin. The boys stayed perfectly still, their training in silence speaking of too much practice hiding from danger. The floorboards above creaked as multiple men entered the cabin. Lantern light filtered through the cracks, casting weird shadows in their underground refuge. Adam positioned himself near the ladder, rifle ready but held carefully to avoid any telling metallic sounds. "Search everything," a rough voice ordered. "They're here somewhere." Drawers scraped open, glass clinked as objects were moved. Heavy footsteps methodically covered every inch of the cabin's floor. Adam could picture the men upending his bed, rifling through cupboards, checking behind the stove. Will whimpered softly. Millie's hand gently covered his mouth, while Ben gripped his brother's arm. The four of them huddled together in the shadows, listening to the systematic destruction of Adam's home. "Nothing up here," someone reported. "Check the cellar," came the response. Adam's muscles tensed. The trapdoor's hinges squealed as it lifted, sending a shaft of lantern light down the ladder. A booted foot appeared on the top rung, followed by a leg. Millie pulled the boys deeper into the shadows. Adam waited, counting the man's steps down. 1, 2, 3. The lantern swung down, illuminating the cellar's nearest corner. Just as the man's head cleared the opening, Adam surged upward. He drove the trapdoor hard with his shoulder, catching the searcher off balance. The man tumbled backward with a startled cry, his lantern shattering. "Now!" Adam hissed. "The tunnel!" Millie herded the twins toward the narrow passage they used for storing root vegetables. The earthen tunnel extended 20 feet, emerging behind Adam's tool shed. He had expanded it years ago, never imagining it would become an escape route. "Hurry!" Millie urged, helping the boys crawl through the confined space. Their small bodies moved quickly, driven by fear. She followed close behind them, her skirts gathering dirt. Adam brought up the rear, moving backward to cover their escape. Above, boots thundered across the floor. Angry voices shouted commands. The cellar filled with lantern light as more men descended. The cool night air hit Adam's face as he emerged from the tunnel. Millie and the boys were already on their feet, darting toward the trees. They had nearly reached the forest's edge when riders materialized from the darkness, cutting off their escape. "Hold it right there," a voice commanded. Rifle barrels gleamed in the moonlight. Millie pushed the boys behind her, backing away. "Run!" she told them. But more horsemen appeared, encircling them completely. A rider drove his horse forward. Will stumbled. Millie reached for him, but another man swung his rifle like a club. The wooden stock caught her temple with a sickening crack. She crumpled to the frozen ground. "Millie!" Adam lunged toward her. Two men grabbed his arms. He drove an elbow into one's stomach, twisted free, and landed a solid punch that sent the other staggering. But more hands seized him. Someone's fist slammed into his jaw. Another blow doubled him over. Through blurring vision, he saw the twins being lifted onto horses. They fought like wild things, kicking and clawing. "Pa!" Ben screamed. "Papa, help! Please!" Will's voice cracked with terror. "Don't let them take us!" Adam struggled against the men holding him, his heart tearing at the boys' desperate cries. A rifle barrel pressed against his temple, forcing him to stillness. A figure rode forward, silhouetted against the stars. Deputy Harlan Briggs sat tall in his saddle, official papers held importantly in one gloved hand. "By order of the Territorial Court," Briggs announced with obvious satisfaction, "these dangerous minors are hereby remanded to proper custody." He made a show of displaying the documents, though the darkness made reading impossible. "Those papers are forged," Adam spat. "You have no right." The rifle barrel dug harder into his skin. "Shut your mouth," growled its owner. Briggs smiled coldly. "I have every right, and you'll stay right here while we conclude our business, unless you prefer a bullet." The twins were bound onto their horses now, still struggling. Their terrified faces turned toward Adam, silently begging him to save them. He strained against the hands holding him, muscles trembling with desperate effort. "Remember the verses!" he shouted. "Hold tight to what you know!" A fist drove into his stomach, stealing his breath. Through watering eyes, he watched helplessly as the riders wheeled their horses toward the canyon trail. The boy's cries grew fainter until only the thunder of hooves disturbed the night. The men holding Adam shoved him roughly to his knees. Briggs leaned down from his saddle. "Count yourself lucky," the deputy sneered. "Next time you interfere with official business, you won't walk away." He straightened up, gathering his reins. "Let's ride." The remaining men mounted quickly. Within moments, they too had vanished into the darkness, leaving Adam alone with his failure. He crawled to where Millie lay motionless in the snow. Blood matted her hair where the rifle stock had struck. With trembling hands, he felt for her pulse, nearly sobbing with relief when he found it steady beneath his fingers. "Millie," he whispered hoarsely. "Millie, wake up, please!" Her eyelids fluttered. A soft moan escaped her lips. Adam gathered her carefully into his arms, his guilt a crushing weight as he carried her toward the cabin. Inside, the destruction was complete. Furniture lay overturned, cupboard contents scattered across the floor. Even the stovepipe had been pulled apart in their thorough search. The boys' wooden figures lay broken among the debris. Adam placed Millie gently on his bed. He wet a cloth to clean her wound, his hands shaking as he worked. Dawn's first gray light crept through the windows, illuminating the devastation of his homestead. But the physical damage was nothing compared to the hollow ache in his chest. He had promised to protect those boys. They had trusted him, called him Pa with such hope. Now they were gone, carried away into the darkness by men who meant them harm. Millie stirred, her eyes opening slowly. "Adam?" she murmured. "The boys. They took them." His voice cracked. "I couldn't stop them. Millie, I'm so sorry." She reached for his hand, squeezing it weakly. "Not your fault," she whispered. "We'll find them. We have to." Adam bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. Outside, the rising sun painted the mountain peaks blood red. But inside the shattered cabin, shadows still held sway, none darker than the guilt and grief that threatened to overwhelm him. The boys' final desperate cries echoed in his memory. They had looked to him for protection, believed in him as their father. He had failed them completely. Dawn approached with agonizing slowness, each brightening moment revealing new evidence of all he had lost. The sun crept over the mountain ridge, painting the devastated cabin in harsh morning light. Adam's hands shook slightly as he opened his medical kit, removing carbolic acid and clean bandages. Millie sat quietly at his rough-hewn table, her face pale but determined beneath the dried blood matting her hair. "This will sting something fierce," Adam warned softly, dampening a cloth with the sharp-smelling liquid. Millie nodded, gripping the table edge. "Do what needs doing." Adam worked as gently as he could, cleaning the ugly gash where the rifle stock had struck her temple. Millie flinched but made no sound as he dabbed away crusted blood and dirt. The wound looked angry, but thankfully not as deep as he had feared in the chaos of night. "Lord, guide these hands," he murmured, carefully wrapping clean bandages around her head. The familiar words of prayer steadied his trembling fingers. "I can ride," Millie insisted, even before he finished tying off the bandage. "We need to follow them now, while the trail's fresh." Adam studied her face, noting the determination burning through her pallor. "You're sure? Those boys need us." Her voice grew stronger. "I won't slow you down." Adam nodded slowly, knowing argument would waste precious time. He gathered what they would need: his Winchester rifle and spare ammunition, blankets rolled tight, strips of dried venison, and canteens filled from the spring. His movements were quick but thorough, years of mountain living having taught him what essentials could mean the difference between life and death. Millie rose carefully from the table, swaying slightly before finding her balance. Adam pretended not to notice how she gripped the chair back, giving her pride room to breathe. He focused instead on loading their supplies onto the horses. "I'll tie Sugar's reins to Buck," he said, referring to Millie's mare and his own sturdy gelding. "That way you can concentrate on staying mounted." The morning air bit cold and clean as they set out, following the churned earth and broken branches left by the kidnappers' passage. Adam led them down the mountain trail, his eyes constantly scanning the ground. Here and there, hoofprints showed clear in patches of lingering snow. Broken twigs pointed their way like arrows. "They weren't trying to hide their trail," Millie observed, one hand pressed to her bandaged head. "No need," Adam replied grimly. "They have the law's protection, false as it is." The thought of Deputy Briggs's smug face made his jaw clench. The horses picked their way carefully down the steep path. Though Adam's instincts screamed to hurry, he forced himself to maintain a pace Millie could manage. The sun climbed higher, warming the chill air. Birds called from the trees, their ordinary morning songs a strange counterpoint to the fear gripping his heart. Near midday, Adam reined Buck to a halt, spotting something pale flutter against dark juniper branches. His boots crunched on scattered pine needles as he dismounted to investigate. "What is it?" Millie asked, straightening in her saddle. Adam carefully untangled the scrap of fabric caught in the thorny branches. His throat tightened as he recognized the torn edge of the boy's precious hymn cloth. "They came this way," he said, tucking the scrap into his shirt pocket. "Not more than a few hours ahead now." Millie's eyes brightened with hope. "They're leaving us signs to follow." "Brave boys," Adam murmured. He remembered Will's serious face bent over Millie's writing lessons, Ben's determined efforts to stack firewood just like him. His chest ached with mingled pride and worry. Removing his hat, Adam closed his eyes. His mother's voice seemed to whisper with the wind through the trees, reminding him of childhood prayers. "Lord," he spoke aloud, voice rough with emotion, "grant us strength for this journey. Protect those boys until we reach them. Guide our path to justice." He paused, adding softly, "And forgive me for failing them." "Amen," Millie whispered. They pressed on through the afternoon, following the kidnappers' trail as it wound down into deeper canyons. The sun threw long shadows by the time Adam called a halt, noting Millie's increasing sway in the saddle. "There's an overhang ahead," he said, pointing to a natural shelter formed by jutting rock. "We'll rest there tonight." Millie started to protest, but seemed to think better of it, nodding wearily instead. The strain of riding with her injury showed in the tight lines around her mouth. Adam helped her dismount, steadying her when she stumbled. He quickly gathered dry wood, building a small fire well back under the overhang where its light wouldn't betray their position. The flames cast dancing shadows on the rock face as darkness settled over the canyon. They shared strips of jerky and water from their canteens, huddling close to the fire's warmth. Millie's face looked drawn in the flickering light, but her eyes were clear as she studied Adam across the flames. "There's more you should know," she said quietly, "about Marshal Grant and why these men want his boys so badly." Adam leaned forward, warming his hands. "Tell me." "Silas Payne. He's a railroad lawyer, slick as a snake oil salesman." Millie's voice hardened with contempt. "He was behind a scheme to steal water rights from native families, forge documents showing they'd sold their claims. The railroad needed those water sources for their new lines." She paused, touching her bandaged head gingerly. Marshal Grant discovered the fraud. He gathered evidence, started building a case. But before he could bring it to the territorial judge, Payne's men framed him as an outlaw, said he was taking bribes, helping raiders steal cattle. "And the boys?" Adam prompted softly. "They must know something, or have something. Papers, maybe, or letters proving their father's innocence. Something Payne fears enough to send armed men to kidnap 2 children." Adam stared into the flames, remembering the terror in the twins' faces when the riders appeared. His hands clenched into fists. "I don't care what papers they have," he said, voice low and fierce. "They're just boys. Nobody has the right to hurt them." Millie reached across the fire to touch his arm. "We'll find them, Adam." He met her eyes, seeing his own determination reflected there. "Yes, we will." They settled down to sleep, sharing blankets for warmth. The fire burned low, casting just enough light to hold back the pressing darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called mournfully. Adam lay awake long after Millie's breathing steadied into sleep. His mind turned over and over, like water wearing smooth a stone. The boys' faces, their trust in him, their desperate cries as they were taken. He had never meant to be anyone's father, never thought to have a family to protect. But those boys had worked their way into his heart as surely as spring thaw softens frozen ground. "I'm coming for you," he whispered to the stars. "Hold on, boys. Just hold on." When false dawn began to pale the eastern sky, they were already mounted and moving. The trail led deeper into the canyons, where morning shadows stretched long and blue. Adam touched the scrap of hymn cloth in his pocket, drawing strength from the boy's courage in leaving it. Millie rode straighter today, though the bandage on her head remained a stark reminder of all they faced. They shared pieces of jerky as they traveled, not stopping to rest. Time pressed on them like a physical weight. "We're gaining on them," Adam said, studying fresh hoofprints in a patch of sandy soil. "They're slowing down, getting careless." Millie nodded grimly. "Good, because when we find them—" She left the thought unfinished, but her hand strayed to the rifle secured to her saddle. Adam understood perfectly. He had always been a peaceful man, preferring solitude to confrontation. But for those boys, for the family he never meant to find, he would face whatever came. His mother's faith and his own hard-won wisdom would have to light the way. The sun climbed higher as they pressed on, following the trail of those who had stolen his boys. Adam's resolve hardened with each hoofbeat. Whatever Payne's men had planned, whatever conspiracy they meant to protect, they had made a grave mistake in thinking 2 small boys were easy prey. They had not counted on a mountain man's determination, or a schoolteacher's courage, or the strength that comes from fighting for what's right. Most of all, they had not counted on the fierce love of a father who never meant to be one, until 2 young boys tumbled into his life and changed everything. The canyon walls glowed amber in the first light of dawn. Adam studied the ground intently, Buck's reins loose in his hands. Fresh tracks showed where the kidnappers' horses had churned the sandy soil, but something was different. He dismounted for a closer look. "They switched mounts here," he said, pointing to scattered gear half buried in the dirt. "Abandoned their tired horses for fresh ones." Millie carefully slid from her saddle, steadying herself against her mare's flank. Her bandaged head still pained her, but her eyes were sharp as she examined the scene. Saddle blankets, old bits. She lifted a worn leather strap. They left anything that might slow them down. "Means they had help waiting," Adam said grimly. "Well-planned operation." Millie nodded slowly, then pressed her fingers to her temples as if trying to capture a memory. Adam, those verses the boys kept reciting, I've been turning them over in my mind all morning. There was something about them. The scripture passages their father taught them? Yes. Millie's voice grew stronger as she concentrated. The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. That was one, and another about waters running true in ancient paths. Then something about the hidden cleft where safety dwells. Adam went still, his weathered face intent. Say that last part again. The hidden cleft where safety dwells. The boys said it over and over, like their father made them memorize it exactly. Millie. Adam's voice was urgent now. Those aren't just Bible verses, they're directions. He strode to his saddlebags and pulled out a battered map of the territory. Spreading it on a flat boulder, he traced lines with his finger while Millie watched. Here, there's an old trapper's line shack up in a narrow gulch. Local folks call it Rejected Stone Gulch because the granite's too crumbly for building, and it's fed by an underground spring, waters running true. The whole gulch is like a hidden cleft in the rock. Millie's eyes widened. Marshall Grant wasn't just teaching them verses for comfort, he was showing them where to find something. Something that could clear his name, Adam said, and now Payne's men have forced the boys to lead them straight to it. They remounted quickly, adjusting their course toward the gulch. Adam led them on a winding path that used the terrain for cover. Every so often they paused to listen for pursuit or check their direction against the sun. Near noon, as they picked their way through a narrow defile, Millie suddenly raised her hand. Wait, did you hear that? Adam reined Buck to a stop, head cocked. For a moment, only the wind spoke. Then, carried on the air, came the faint sound of men's voices raised in argument. Stay here, Adam whispered. He dismounted and moved forward on foot, staying close to the canyon wall. The voices grew clearer as he crept forward. Rounding a bend, he found a spot where he could peer up at the line shack, perched on a natural shelf about 50 feet above the canyon floor. 2 men with rifles stood guard outside. Through the shack's single window, he caught a glimpse of the twins huddled together on a bench. His heart clenched at the sight of them, but he forced himself to study the situation carefully before retreating to Millie's position. They're there, he reported in a low voice. 4 men that I could see, maybe more inside. The boys appear unharmed, but they're guarding them close. Millie's face was pale but determined. We need a plan. We can't just charge in. They'd shoot us down before we got halfway up that slope. Adam nodded grimly. He helped Millie dismount, and they found a sheltered spot where they could talk without being overheard. There's something else working in our favor, he said. See those snowbanks up there? He pointed to white patches clinging to the canyon's upper slopes. Weather's warming. That snow's unstable, ready to slide at any disturbance. An avalanche. Millie's voice was thoughtful. If we could trigger one in the right spot, might give us the distraction we need. Adam's eyes met hers. But Millie, this won't be easy. Even with a diversion, we're still outnumbered. And if anything goes wrong, I know. She touched his arm gently. But those boys trust us, Adam. They trusted you from the moment they tumbled out of that crate, and I believe they were right to. Adam was quiet for a long moment, remembering the twins' faces that first night. Their complete faith that he would keep them safe. He had failed them once. He would not fail them again. Their father must have known what he was doing, Millie continued softly. Sending them to you. Marshall Grant was a good man, Adam. Everyone who really knew him said so. He wouldn't have sacrificed his career, risked everything, without real cause. And he wouldn't have endangered his sons without desperate need, Adam agreed. He straightened his shoulders. All right, we have a few hours until sunset. Let's work out exactly how we're going to do this. They spent the remaining daylight preparing. Adam carefully measured and coiled rope, tested knots, cleaned his rifle. Millie helped gather loose rocks they could use to trigger the snowslide. They spoke in low voices, planning each step. As evening approached, the canyon air grew sharper. Shadows lengthened across the rocks. Adam positioned their horses where they would be safe, but accessible for a quick escape if needed. "The snow will be most unstable at first light," he explained, "when the surface starts to warm, but the deeper layers are still frozen." He showed Millie the exact spot where they would need to place their charges to start the slide. She listened intently, memorizing every detail. Though her head wound still troubled her, her eyes were clear and focused. "And once the snow starts moving? We'll have moments at most before they realize what's happening. You'll need to be ready to move fast." Millie checked her rifle one final time. "I'll be ready." They shared the last of their jerky as true night settled over the canyon. The quarter moon cast just enough light to see by without betraying their position. Above them, a lamp burned in the line shack window. "Try to rest," Adam told Millie. "I'll take first watch." She nodded, wrapping herself in her blanket. But after a while, she spoke softly into the darkness. "Adam, what you said before about failing them, you didn't. You've shown more courage and care for those boys than most bloodkin would." Adam was silent for a long moment, watching the stars wheel overhead. "When my mother died," he finally said, "I thought I was done with family. Easier to be alone. Safer." He touched the scrap of hymn cloth in his pocket. "But those boys, the way they look at me." "Like you're their whole world," Millie finished gently. "Yeah." His voice was rough with emotion. "Reckon maybe the Lord knew what he was doing, sending them my way, even if I didn't see it at first." Millie's hand found his in the darkness. "We'll get them back, Adam. And then maybe—" She let the thought trail off, but her fingers stayed warm in his. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the lamp in the line shack window. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The stars continued their slow dance across the sky. Dawn would come soon enough, and with it, the moment to prove what love and courage could accomplish against greed and corruption. Adam touched the hymn cloth again, drawing strength from the faith it represented. The faith of a father protecting his sons, a mother hiding her children, and two small boys who never stopped believing help would come. Tomorrow would test that faith. But for now, in this quiet moment between planning and action, Adam let himself feel the rightness of this path he had never expected to walk. The path that had led him from solitude to purpose, from loneliness to family. And whatever tomorrow brought, he knew he would never walk alone again. The pale morning sun had barely crested the ridge when Adam took his position. His boots crunched softly in the crusty snow as he found the perfect spot overlooking the line shack. Below, Millie waited near the canyon mouth, her rifle ready. Adam studied the snow shelf carefully. Years of mountain living had taught him how snow behaved, where it would slide, how it would fall. He didn't aim to kill anyone, just to trap them long enough to get the boys out. Taking a deep breath, he raised his rifle. The shot cracked through the morning stillness like thunder. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a low rumble began. The snow shelf shuddered, broke free, and cascaded down the slope. The roar grew deafening as more snow joined the slide. Shouts erupted from the shack as the gang realized what was happening. Men burst outside, scrambling to escape the approaching wall of white. Their horses, spooked by the noise, pulled free of their ties and bolted. Millie seized her moment. While the men were distracted, she darted toward the shack, staying close to the rock wall. Adam was already racing down the slope, his boots finding purchase on familiar terrain. His heart pounded with each step, not from exertion, but from fear for the twins. He reached the shack just as Millie did. Inside, Ben and Will huddled together, tears streaming down their faces. The moment they saw Adam, they launched themselves at him. "Pa!" they sobbed in unison, clinging to his coat. A shot rang out. One of the gang members had kept his head. The bullet grazed Adam's arm, burning like fire. But he barely felt it. The avalanche's momentum carried a wave of snow between them and the shooter, cutting off any chance of pursuit. Millie quickly gathered the hymn scraps and scripture notes that had fallen from the boys' pockets. "We need to move," she urged, "before more snow comes down." Adam nodded. He swung Ben onto his back, gripping Will's small hand tightly in his own. Together they picked their way carefully down the slope, staying ahead of the settling snow. Will stumbled once, but Adam's grip kept him upright. "I've got you, son," he murmured. "I've got you both now." They moved steadily toward town, carrying their precious burden of boys and evidence. Behind them, the avalanche had transformed the canyon, burying the line shack in a blanket of white. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Adam guided the wagon into town. Ben and Will sat close on either side of him, their small hands gripping his coat. Millie rode alongside, the precious bundle of scripture notes and hymn pages secured in her satchel. Judge Tolliver called an emergency session the moment Millie presented the evidence. Word spread quickly through town, and people filtered into the courthouse, filling the wooden benches. The twins pressed closer to Adam as more folks gathered. Standing before the judge's bench, Millie carefully laid out the coded verses. "Marshal Grant hid his evidence in locations described by these scripture passages," she explained. "The boy's mother protected these codes with her life." Judge Tolliver's stern face grew grave as he decoded the references. "The stone the builders rejected. That's Widow's Peak Cave. Waters running true. The old survey marker by Crystal Creek." Deputies dispatched to these locations returned with dusty strongboxes. Inside lay land deeds, forged documents, and detailed accounts of Payne's schemes to steal native water rights through the railroad's expansion. As Millie testified about the twins' kidnapping, Adam kept a protective arm around the boys. His voice carried clearly through the crowded room when he described the armed men who had tried to silence two innocent children. Native leaders from neighboring territories sat in the front row, their faces solemn as years of suspected wrongdoing came to light. Chief Walking Bear nodded gravely when the judge read how Payne had manipulated property lines to steal precious water sources. The evidence mounted as evening approached. Judge Tolliver's voice rang with authority. "Marshal Elias Grant was falsely accused. His name is hereby cleared." He turned to where Payne sat between two deputies. "Silas Payne and Deputy Briggs, you are under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, and fraud." The posse led them away in irons as townsfolk murmured their approval. Several native elders approached Adam and Millie, speaking quietly of their gratitude that justice had finally come. Through it all, Ben and Will stayed glued to Adam's side. When Chief Walking Bear offered them a blessing in his native tongue, they looked up at Adam with complete trust, knowing they were finally safe. Millie stood beside them, her head held high despite her healing wounds. As the courthouse slowly emptied, she smiled at the way the twins leaned against Adam, a family forged in fire, made stronger by truth. The morning sun warmed the courthouse steps as Adam straightened his clean work shirt. Millie gave his arm a reassuring squeeze before they entered. Inside, Ben and Will sat close together on a polished wooden bench, their faces solemn in their borrowed Sunday clothes. Judge Tolliver called the guardianship hearing to order, his voice echoing in the hushed chamber. Adam stood before the bench, his weathered hands steady as he spoke of that strange autumn day when two small boys tumbled from a freight wagon into his life. They came with nothing but trust and hope, Adam explained, his deep voice carrying clearly. At first I thought it was a mistake, but now I know it was providence. He described their days at the homestead, teaching the twins to stack kindling, sharing meals by lamplight, watching them grow stronger despite danger. Millie stepped forward next, telling of the boys' quick minds and gentle hearts. They've flourished under Adam's care, she testified. Even in those first difficult days, they knew they'd found their home. When the twins' turn came, they walked hand in hand to face the judge. Will spoke first, his small voice steady. Adam's our pa by heart now. Ben nodded firmly, adding, He keeps us safe and teaches us good things. The afternoon light slanted through tall windows as Judge Tolliver signed the guardianship papers. By the power vested in me, he declared, I hereby grant full guardianship of Benjamin and William Grant to Adam Crowley. Outside on the courthouse steps, Chief Walking Bear and other tribal leaders approached. Through their translator, they expressed deep gratitude. Marshal Grant's recovered evidence would restore water rights stolen years ago. Adam nodded respectfully, understanding that justice reached beyond his new family. Millie touched Adam's arm gently. I've decided to stay in town, she said. The school needs a teacher, and the boys will need help with their lessons, especially during the long mountain winters. That evening, they gathered in Millie's rented cabin near the square. The simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread tasted like celebration. As Ben and Will helped clear the dishes, Adam and Millie began planning the journey home. Tomorrow they would return to the mountain homestead, not just Adam's cabin now, but a true home for a family forged by faith and courage. The next morning dawned with pristine clarity, the sky a deep mountain blue above snow-dusted peaks. Adam secured the last bundle to the wagon, while Millie helped the twins into their warm coats. The horses' breath steamed in the cool air as they started the slow climb home. Will and Ben pointed out familiar landmarks along the mountain road. The twisted juniper where they'd gathered berries, the rocky outcrop where they'd learned to watch for eagles. The wagon wheels creaked steadily upward, marking their return to the place that had become sanctuary. They reached the cabin by midday, the sun high and bright. The damage from the kidnappers' raid looked less severe in daylight. A broken door, scattered kindling, upturned furniture. Nothing that couldn't be mended with willing hands and hope. The twins rushed to the hearth, eager to help. They swept away old ashes and gathered fresh tinder, working together with quiet determination. Adam watched them as he repaired the splintered door, his strong hands steady with the tools. Millie moved through the cabin with purpose, setting things right. Soon the stew pot hung from its familiar hook, filling the air with the promise of dinner. Near the woodpile, Ben and Will worked carefully with small knives, shaping a new wooden cross. Unlike their first hurried attempt, this one emerged straight and smooth, a labor of love. As sunset painted the mountains gold, they presented it to Adam with shy pride. Adam held the cross reverently, touched by its simple beauty. He mounted it above the repaired door, where it would bless all who entered. The boys beamed at seeing their gift given such honor. Inside, Millie ladled hot stew into tin bowls. The familiar scent of sage and beef filled the warm cabin. As they ate, she began humming softly, the same hymn the twins had carried in those precious scraps. Ben and Will joined in, their clear voices rising with hers in the firelit room. Adam watched his newfound family, his heart full. These souls God had entrusted to his care had transformed his solitary life into something rich with meaning. The cabin that had known such loneliness now held love and laughter. As night deepened outside, Adam bowed his head in silent prayer. Gratitude welled up inside him, for the children who called him Pa, for Millie's steadfast presence, for this home no longer empty. Here, in this mountain sanctuary, hope bloomed as bright as tomorrow's dawn. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.